Love to see your guys' faces. If you want to show them, that'd be wonderful. I was just talking a couple days ago with a friend of mine. And we were discussing how to make a nice apology. And this is something I've gone over on occasion. How to go about making amends. How to apologize to people when you make a mistake, when you do something wrong. And so I thought we would go over that tonight. I just thought of it, and I thought there might be some value in it. I guess the first thing I'll mention is there was a Scottish theologian, minister. His name was George MacDonald. He wrote a number of books that were the beginning of fantasy literature. He was a big inspiration for Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland and Beyond the Looking Glass, I think was the other book that Lewis Carroll wrote, the other book that he wrote. And C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings books, they all looked up to this guy. He was like the original fantasy writer. His name was George MacDonald. He lived in the mid-1800s. He made a statement, and the statement was, to be trusted is a greater compliment than to be loved. To be trusted is a greater compliment than being loved. It's a powerful statement. And if you want to understand and appreciate the truth value of the statement, you could just do a thought experiment. You could imagine if you had children and they were drug addicts who stole from you. Would you trust them? No. Would you love them? Yeah. Shakespeare said, love everyone. Love all is what he said. He said, love all. And he said, trust a few and wrong no one. Do wrong to no one. Love all, trust a few, and do wrong to no one. Trust, to have confidence in someone, to depend on somebody, to anchor yourself to them, to be vulnerable with them, to count on them. It's like the biggest compliment you can give somebody, to say you trust somebody. It's a big deal. Sometimes people, they read on the back of a Cracker Jack box or something like that you shouldn't expect anything from anybody. But it's just simply not possible to live in this world like that. Just from a survival perspective, you got to sleep and somebody's got to watch your back or watch the fire. We're social mammals. We live in a pack. That's how we do it. That's the type of animal that we are. Even from a primatological point of view, that's how we're built. Then there's the reality that connection and connecting with people and becoming attached to people and depending on people is what gives joy in life. Oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin are all dramatically affected by your relationships. So it's really not a question of whether or not you should trust people or expect things of people or depend on people. There's no way to function in this world without doing the math and forming appropriate expectations and moving without having everything fall on your shoulders and being forced to reinvent the wheel every single time. There's just no way to live in life without trusting some people. So now it becomes a game of who you should trust. You should love everyone, love all, trust a few, and do wrong to no one. Shakespeare really, like so many cool things he said. Wear your heart on your sleeve, that's from Shakespeare. Time waits for no man. All these like cool statements that we have that are filled with wisdom and are almost cliched, they're so pregnant with wisdom. They come from Shakespeare. You could love somebody and it doesn't say anything about their character or their integrity or their responsibility or their evolution. You can love them for whatever reason. Love them because they're your kid, you're connected to them. Love them because they're a soul. But it doesn't say anything about their standing, their evolution, their dependability, their integrity, their morality, their depth. Trusting somebody does indicate that. Indicates that you feel someone is honest enough and dependable enough that you anchor yourself to them and you count on them. And given that we're made to count on people and it's how we function, is what gives value to life. Even if you could play a game by yourself, why do that? It's a lot more fun to play with other people. So, when you talk about making an apology, what we're really talking about is reconciling with somebody and reestablishing trust once it's been broken. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily require you to trust the person again. It just means you let go of your negative feelings and you wish well upon them. You can forgive anybody for practically speaking anything. You might think, nobody could ever forgive somebody for doing this. But then if you go on Google, you'll find somebody forgiving somebody for doing exactly that thing. I got a lady who adopted the guy who murdered her son after he went to jail for 25 years, and now he lives with her. People forgive the rapists. They forgive the people who molested them. They forgive people who genocidally wiped out their whole family. Forgiveness is incredible. It's cathartic. It's very much about letting go and moving on. It honestly doesn't really depend on the person you're forgiving. They don't even have to feel remorse. They don't even have to repair themselves. It's about you moving forward in your life. Forgetfulness happens too. That's also not the same as a reconciliation. Sometimes you condone somebody's actions. You say, okay, what you did wasn't wrong. Given the circumstances, it was okay. I would have done the same thing. Pardoning somebody. Okay, from a legal point of view, I have the ability to pardon you. Pardoning is a legal thing. I'm pardoning you. Excusing you, for something you've done means that you weren't mature enough to be held responsible. You're excused because you're not held accountable. You're forgiven because somebody's moving forward and letting go. It's condoned because you didn't do anything wrong. It's forgotten because time just kind of washes everything away. You're pardoned. You are, like the president has a pardon. It's a whole thing right now in the White House. They've got a spreadsheet because so many people are approaching Trump to get pardoned. He's in his lame duck phase. When you're sitting president, you lose your bid for re-election. You're called a lame duck. It's a real insulting way to refer to the president of the United States. He's a lame duck. He can't do anything because he's been voted out, and he's just kind of waiting his time out. So he has to move out of the White House. He gets evicted from the White House. And so one of the powers he does still have is the power to pardon people. So he started pardoning a bunch of his cronies, even some of whom have been convicted of crimes, people who were his friends. And there's so many people approaching him for pardons because he has the ability to pardon, like on a high level. And so federal crimes. And so they had to make a spreadsheet to list all the people who are looking for pardons. And according to White House insiders, it's kind of a topic of conversation. Who do you think I should pardon? And what do you guys think about this one? Trump is taking advice from his advisors who should be pardoned in his last days of his presidency. So pardoning is a legal thing. When we talk about making amends with somebody, when we talk about apologizing to somebody, our aspiration should really be to reconcile with them and regain their trust. That's what you should be trying to do. To reestablish trust. And so if you want to do that, the first thing you should do when you apologize to somebody, the first thing out of your mouth should be an appreciation of the person. You should find things in that person that you appreciate. And if you just make stuff up or say generic things, it doesn't hit. So your first step one in an apology is to appreciate the person. And if you make that appreciation generic, their heart won't soften. And if you make stuff up that's not true, they might believe you if they're like into flattery, but if they're serious people and you say something that's not true and it's just hyperbolic, that won't impress. You might not think about this, but really the person we want to reconcile with is ultimately Krishna. And so our ability to reconcile and regain trust and reestablish a connection, and an intimate connection, ultimately leads to our ability to reconnect with Krishna and to feel remorse for turning away from Krishna and to reestablish a connection with Krishna. So this ability to make amends isn't just something which is secularly valuable in this world. It's something which has tremendous value for your spiritual life. It's major. It's not a minor thing. It's a major thing. I think I'm going to switch the view here so I can see everybody. That's better. Yeah. So this stuff echoes into eternity. We make amends in this world so we can make amends in that world. We make amends with our fellow mankind, our fellow people of this world, and that leads us to be able to make amends with our Maker. In a lot of ways, it's the core of spiritual life. That's why confession is a big part of Catholicism. That's why it's like to forgive is divine. There's this idea that the real hero's journey is to go back to Godhead. The real romance novel is to reconnect with Krishna. That's the most important relationship that we need to reestablish and renovate and revitalize. And so the way we behave with people in this world becomes a springboard for the way we think about and behave with Krishna. It becomes representative of how we feel about God and how we feel about the big topics in life. Anyway, so we'll get back to that. The first thing you do is you express appreciation. You actually find this in our scriptures. When Indra sought forgiveness from Krishna after the Govardhan Leela fiasco, he appreciated Krishna and glorified him. That's what happens. That's what's done. Well, the demigods glorified Narasimha when they were trying to calm him down. Arjuna, same thing. Please forgive me for not having understood your glories, for treating you very casually, for not understanding who you actually were. That's the theophany of the 11th chapter of the Gita when Krishna shows himself to Arjuna in the universal form. Arjuna's reaction is to ask for forgiveness for not understanding Krishna properly. When you appreciate somebody, you should appreciate them for qualities they actually have. If you can't think of anything a person has that's worthy of appreciating, there's something wrong with you, and you're probably not qualified to make an apology. If all you can come up with is flattery or generic platitudes, you're probably not evolved enough to make an apology. So you start off by appreciating the person. Reminds you of who they are. Reminds you of how you wrong them. It sets the stage for you to go to the place you need to go to make a proper apology. And making a proper apology is cathartic. It stimulates growth. It's powerful. So then the next thing you do is you make the apology. It's verbal. It's a verbal apology. You tell the person exactly what you did wrong. And you actually go through what you did wrong. You say the things that you did wrong. This demonstrates to the other party that you know your mistakes because you've outlined them. They don't have to tell you. So many times people apologize to you. I'm like, you don't even know what you did wrong, do you? You don't even get it. The way you deal with that is you thoroughly go through and delineate exactly what you did wrong. Most people can't do that because it's too cathartic. They end up stumbling and speaking in generalizations because to actually detail what they did wrong it's too challenging. They don't have the courage. Cur means heart. They don't have the heart to actually be vulnerable and open themselves up. Their self-esteem is too small, and to really look at what they've done, it's too much. They spend most of their time trying to inflate themselves and not feel bad about themselves. So when they have to admit what they did wrong and go to a deep place and feel bad about what they've done, they can't do it. Ian, you surprised how much more detail I can go in? You thought we'd done it threadbare, right? Yeah. you explain exactly what you did wrong. And then you tell the person what you were thinking when you did the wrong thing. That goes one of two ways. You tell them what you were thinking, and sometimes it explains a little bit about your misunderstanding, the limited information you were operating with, and it actually helps the person to forgive you. Sometimes when you tell the person what you were thinking, it makes you all the more guilty. Either way, you got to tell the person what you're thinking. Because when it comes time to making amends and reestablishing trust, the basis of trust is honesty. That the person's not deceiving you and conning you. It's the foundation of trust is honesty. People can be honest and untrustworthy, but no one can be trustworthy but dishonest. It's a prerequisite. Honesty is a prerequisite for trust. It's necessary but insufficient pre-qualification for trust. Like you got to be in the ballpark to be on the field. Just because you're in the ballpark doesn't mean you're on the playing field. But if you're not in the ballpark, definitely you're not on the playing field. It's a necessary but insufficient prerequisite. What you did and what you were thinking. Then you tell the person that you're sorry. And you commit to them that you're not going to do it again. And you tell them what you're going to do to remunerate them, to fix what you did wrong. Our scriptures speak about when you make offense, what to do. You offend a Vaishnava, you then have to spend the rest of your life glorifying that Vaishnava. You offend our scriptures, you spend the rest of your life glorifying our scriptures. You offend the holy name, you have to glorify the holy name. Whatever you did wrong, you have to do it right. One devotee offended someone, a Brahmin offended a devotee. He then became a Vaishnava. He wrote prayers naming 500 devotees from Navadvip, from Odisha, from Vrindavan, and he would recite the names of those 500 Vaishnavas as a homage every day. It's the Vaishnav Vandan, prayers to the Vaishnavas. It's just a list of names of great devotees who were his contemporaries and elders, just recited off as an act of devotion. You steal money, you give it all back. You suffer to give back what you stole. If you want to apologize and make amends, and you don't want to give back what you stole, then you shouldn't bother making amends. Sometimes it's not possible to give back what you stole. Then you do the best you can. You do the best you can to repair things, to fix things, to right them. When you start to go down the road of I stole this, but I'm glad I stole it, I don't want to give it back, then you don't deserve to be forgiven. Or maybe you deserve to be forgiven, you definitely don't deserve to be trusted again. Sometimes when you think about making amends or an apology, you'll realize, I'm not actually qualified to make an apology. I'm really just looking for a pass. I need to assuage my guilty conscience a little bit, but I'm happy I did what I did. I don't have any regrets. I'm glad I did what I did, what I took, what I stole, what I cheated, how I lied, what I got away with. I'm glad I did it. I'm for sure not interested in like fixing it. It's way too much work. So anyway, you make an apology. You say what you did wrong. You say you're sorry. You say what you were thinking. And you say what you're going to do to fix things. This is all verbal. It's a verbal commitment. It demonstrates to the other party that you've understood what you did, that they don't need to bother educating you on it, and it's you committing to making things right. But you don't actually have to do anything. You just have to say the right things. Thing is, with people who aren't trustworthy, you should not listen to what they say. You should just listen to what they do. You should watch them and see what they do. People can say anything. What they do tells you where they're really at. But in the beginning, if you want to establish a connection, you got to start with something. You can't, and so you start by appreciating the person, by telling them what you did, by telling them what you were thinking, by saying you're sorry, by committing to not doing it again, and committing to making amends with them. It's all verbal. It's all theoretical. And then there's part two. Part two gets deeper. And in some ways, these two things, these two steps, step one is appreciation, step two is the apology. What I did, what I was thinking, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, here's how I'm going to make it right. That step and this next step, step 2 and 3, those two steps are really the same thing in an introductory and a more deep way, like a helix. It's the same circle, but it moves forward. The second one is you feel and express remorse. Remorse is powerful because when somebody feels and expresses remorse, it means they are able to cognize and understand how what they did was wrong. And that's your surest proof that they won't commit the same mistake again. Now, if you think it's tough to tell somebody what you did wrong and have the courage to tell somebody what you did wrong and what you were thinking, that's just the first step. That's the light version. The heavy version is to feel and express remorse for what you've done. Interestingly, remorse is also verbal, so it's not action. It's still just a verbal expression or an internal thing. But the vulnerability created when somebody expresses remorse, the difficulty there is in faking remorse. If you feel remorse, then living up to your commitment to make things right becomes child's play. It's easy. You say what you're going to do to make it right, then you have to do that. But compared to feeling and expressing remorse, that stuff's all easy. When you feel remorse about what you've done wrong, when you go to that even more vulnerable place of acknowledging inherent wrongness of what you said, what you did, what you thought, that signals to the other person in the most powerful way possible that you won't commit the same mistake again. Theoretically, you get caught stealing, and you could give all the money back because you're afraid of going to jail, and you could say you're sorry. But go into this deep place of expressing remorse, of empathizing with the other person to such an extent that you walk a mile in their shoes and you feel their pain and you communicate to them how much you must have hurt them, how badly you feel about it, how it tortures you. That remorse ensures that you won't make the same mistake again. It purifies you. Remorse in Sanskrit is anutap. It means to be purified after the fact. Metanoia in Greek. To think about something after the fact. Remorse automatically entails having done something wrong because you have to go back and think it through and realize your mistake. So step one, you appreciate the other person. Step two, you tell them what you did, what you were thinking, say you're sorry, commit to not doing it again, and make amends. Number three is really the same apology on a deeper level. You empathize with them. You walk a mile in their shoes. You deeply understand how you hurt them. You own it. You speak it. You feel bad about it. You let the person see you feel bad. And really, you say you're sorry all over again. But this time on a much deeper level. You tell them you're not going to do it again on a much deeper level. That remorse part is what gives people the confidence to reconcile with you and trust you again. It means that you are carrying that weight on your shoulders and they don't need to critique you anymore, fault you or keep you in line or watch their back. You're watching their back. You've owned it. You're carrying that weight on your shoulders. They can put it down. They can forgive, they can trust again, they can reconcile because you've changed. Remorse is the hero's journey. Remorse is facing down the dragon. Remorse is descending into the abyss and coming out the other side. Remorse leaves you a changed person, where you're no longer the kind of person who would make that mistake again in the future. It's not just resisting the temptation. That's not you anymore. You couldn't do that anymore. And then you change. You become the best version of yourself, a better version of yourself, and you make those amends. You fix the things you've done wrong. So it's like in some ways, the first apology is a theory. The second one is you put it into practice. The first one is verbal. The second one becomes mental. The first one takes courage. The other one takes even more courage to go to a deeper place. The first one shows the person that you know what you did wrong. The second one shows the person you feel what you did was wrong. The first one deals with the kind of like, the negative thing you did. The second one adds in a positive element of actually fixing it and becoming a better person. The first one is shallow, the second one is infinitely more deep. The first one you can fake, the second one you can't. And the reason why you do it a couple times is you show the person you're not trying to get out anything. You've got the wherewithal to sit in the pain with them, to sit in your mistake and not try to get out of it, not try to move on. It shows the person you're willing to stay in that place as long as you need to make things right. You're not in a rush. You're not on a clock. You don't need the person to apologize to forgive them. But the amends is when you actually want to reestablish a relationship of love and trust. And trust is why we're here. We trust the wrong people because they flatter us, and we want flattery. There's a gap between where we are and where we want to be, and somebody tells us we're already over on the other side of the gap, and we don't want to put the hard work in of actually getting there. So then we let them flatter us because they whisper sweet nothings to us. But there's always a price tag attached, and those people who whisper those sweet nothings to you will always betray you. If you're not looking to be deceived when people give you flattery, you'll be like, oh, what are you trying to get out of me? What are you looking for from me? And so when we trust the wrong people, it's usually because there was something broken in us. And that's why we put our faith in the wrong people. When you make amends, you show the person that was mistaken for trusting you that you are actually worth trusting. Trust is always a gift. You don't really earn trust. Trust, just like love, goes beyond something you can earn or just, like buy. There's always an artistic element to it beyond the science of it. It's a gift one person gives to another. And so, through this type of an amends making, through this type of an apology, we put ourselves in the best position for that person to be able to give us that gift and reinvest in us. You show somebody what you're made of, but it's ultimately up to them. When you make amends like this, when you apologize like this, your conscience is clear because you're no longer the person who made the mistake. But it's not that you then skip along like happy-go-lucky. There's a weight that comes with making amends, that you actually become a different person. The child at the beginning of the hero's journey is different than the adult hero who's come back from the abyss. They're changed. They're not the same person anymore. They've evolved. They've grown. And there's a sobriety and a gravitas and a weight and a heaviness that goes with that. Guru literally means heavy in Sanskrit. Guru and laghu. Laghu means light. Guru means heavy. And so this sobriety, this gravitas, this trustworthiness, this depth, this integrity makes it so that people can trust you and anchor themselves to you and depend on you. When you breach it, when you break it, you can fix it, but it's not cheap. Cheap's what got you in the problem in the first place. Cheap is what led you to betray somebody in the first place. You can't put more cheap on cheap. It's not going to fix it. So you got your appreciation of the person. It sets the mood. Next, you have your apology, what you did wrong, what you were thinking. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Here's how I'm going to make it right. And then you got your follow through, which moves you to a deeper place of catharsis with remorse and change and action. And so what is shallow becomes deep. What is introductory becomes realized. What is theoretical becomes practical. What is verbal becomes behavioral. What is verbal becomes cognitive. What is fixing the bad becomes doing the good. And that shifting point, the core, is remorse. And remorse requires vulnerability, guilelessness, honesty, straightforwardness, the opposite of betrayal and duplicity and lying and conniving. This information is valuable on two levels. One is that it teaches you how to make an apology, because we all need to learn the art of apologizing, because we all make mistakes. We all have to learn the art and science of being vulnerable, of repairing things, of opening up, of wearing our heart on our sleeve. On the other side of the equation, it teaches us what to look for when we're trying to establish trusting relationships. And it makes us truth seekers, which automatically makes us lie avoiders or lie detectors. And so this information works both for you as the person who needs to reconcile and make amends, and it works for you when you're the person that someone's attempting to make amends with. And understanding the difference between reconciliation or reestablishment of trust and forgiveness will allow you to forgive everybody, love all, trust a few, in the words of Shakespeare. And that's what's meant by this statement, that to be trusted is a much bigger compliment than being loved. Okay. I think that's kind of what I was thinking today. What time am I at? Yeah, I mean, obviously I can keep talking, but that was sort of what I wanted to say. You guys want to give me some feedback? Want to comment on what I've said? Yeah, M. Loud.
This is just a silly comment, but I just want to say that I never apologized in my life until I met you. So thank you for teaching me how to do that. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, and this, ultimately, we need to apologize to Krishna. That doesn't make sense to a lot of people because they don't really believe in God. Krishna's so abstract, and we think of an apology as being something concrete. But if you actually get it that Krishna's a person, then you'll feel like you want to tell Krishna you're sorry for the mistakes you've made. Just like you'll want to go and tell your gurus if you make a mistake. We make it concrete. We take our vows not to Krishna. It's interesting. When we become a Vaishnava, we don't take our vows to Krishna. We take our vows to our guru as a representative, representing Krishna to us in a more tangible form. But in the same way that you want to apologize to your gurus if you fall short, you also want to apologize to Krishna. You want to go in front of the deities. You want also in your heart, you want to pray to Krishna. And to the Vaishnavas as well, who are part of his, angas and upangas, his limbs. And you have a desire to fix things because you care about those people. You care about your commitment. Their trust in you means something to you. And if you fall short, you want to reconcile. You want to fix it. It drives you. And so, in essence, we're like the prodigal son in the biblical narrative, our nature was we're the son of a very wealthy family. We're endowed automatically with eternality, bliss, and knowledge. These things are our birthright as souls. Our parents are Krishna, is our mother and father. As such, a relationship with Krishna is our birthright. And then we walk away from that. And we turn away from that. And then spiritual life really is coming back to that again. And feeling remorse and having learned our lesson. So we don't make such a foolish mistake again in the future. And we learn to value those things which we didn't value. And we learn to be grateful for those things which we weren't grateful for. And part of that process, that learning process, is feeling remorse. Good people feel remorse when they make a mistake. People who are incapable of feeling remorse or shame or guilt are sociopaths. It's not an enviable position. It's a problem. In many ways, feeling shame and remorse and the catharsis is what makes us not animals. It's part of the higher cognitive function that makes us human beings, that makes us capable of thinking about big concepts like God and the self and who am I and why am I here and trying to be a part of something bigger than yourself. It moves us beyond instinct. It moves us beyond operating off of a script and it puts us in the realm where we can truly exercise our free will and like really love on a deep level and feel on a deep level and think on a deep level and be a deep person. There's this screwed up notion, that somehow or other, like the goal of life is to have no remorse and no guilt or feel no negativity towards your mistakes. But I'm saying exactly the opposite of that. A deep life, a powerful life, a progressive life is one where you can appreciate and be grateful and at the same time see where you went wrong and hold that so that you learn from the human experience. Do you follow that, Em? So not learning how to make an apology has some pretty serious ramifications. It stops you from being a full human. It stops you from being an adult. It stops you from being a theist. It stops you from being deep. We want to be those things. We just don't know how. And so learning these skills is vital for progressive life. More thoughts? V, loud.
I was able to hear your whole class, and so there's just so many things. Thank you so much. One of the things that came to mind was that in order to make a real apology, you have to care more about the other person and repairing that relationship and doing the right thing more than you saving face and your reputation. And it takes a lot.
What a great point. Did you guys hear that? Truly making amends is selfless. Selfish people can't make amends. Self-absorbed people can't make amends. Narcissists can't make amends. Sociopaths can't make amends because they can't feel remorse, which means caring more about the other person than yourself, thinking more about them and how they feel than yourself. And that type of selflessness is really the cornerstone of love. Love is oftentimes defined as wanting the other to be, wanting the other to grow. The very nature of it is a selfless desire for the other person. I was just watching on Instagram, because that's where I get all my stuff from, some guy, some like Poindexter-looking guy with glasses on, who probably had some money, and his girlfriend had a talk show, and he was talking on the talk show, and they were talking about relationships. He was talking about the importance of like being honest, and maybe he's just not that into you, and it might not be that they don't want to get married, they just don't want to get married to you, And you have to learn how to recognize that and not delude yourself. And he referenced when Harry met Sally and where, he said, I don't want to get married, but then a year later he was married to somebody else, and she realized it was that he just didn't want to be married to her. And so the guy was obviously in his 40s because he can do it when Harry met Sally reference. And then it was his girlfriend, who must be some popular person. I was actually going to comment. I never comment on Instagram. I never throw hate. I throw some love. I never throw hate. But I was actually going to comment and throw some hate down because I thought it was just so poor that this stuff was masquerading as it was like woke narcissism. It was like something out of Ayn Rand or something like that. It was pathetic. But he was saying, if I'm going to be with somebody, because he was with this girl obviously for 5 years, and she had him on her talk show, and he was like waxing eloquent. He goes, you used to get sick a lot, and I had to ask myself, can I be with somebody who gets sick a lot? Do you add enough value to my life? Are you a force multiplier in life? Do you do enough for me? I'm thinking, that's like, and like at one point he said, do we bring out the best in each other? But it was like one half sentence out of like several minutes. And she was like, oh, that's so important, bringing it up again. He's like, yeah, I figured out, and you were worth that. And I'm thinking, yeah, because you decided she did enough for you, but where's the love? The basis of love, like in theism, the basis of, if you look at like the origin of Christianity, where like people actually talk about what is love, like they actually get into it. It's funny because you think it's going to be romance literature, but where you really get into love, like deep love, is in religious literature. And love is wanting the other person to grow, to be happy. It's the most selfless. And so remorse is that. It's the essence of that. It's the birthplace of that. It sounds like a negative, but it actually means you value the other person enough that you can confront your own demons and grow and become better. And so, yes, 100%. Remorse at its core is selfless and altruistic and about the other person. And it's about empathy. And it's about compassion. Those are the core of it. And that's why it's powerful, and that's why it reestablishes trust. Because it's the very basis of trust, and it's like in its most essential form. It's what trust and love looks like when you've made a mistake. It's funny, but it's like compassion. There's a theory. Compassion is love manifested towards someone who's suffering. Remorse is love manifested when you've made a mistake. It's the same core ingredient of love manifested in a certain circumstance. Does that make sense? And so it's not a different emotion. And some of the theorists on this, it's actually the same emotion. The same munificent, benign, loving, affection emotion manifested towards someone who's suffering, or alternatively, manifested towards someone that you've wronged. Great thought. Great point. Good stuff. More? Yes. Shri.
As you were sharing, and then also piggybacking off of what Varungi said, what has stood out to me as you taught us how to give proper apologies is how it's really not, if you're the one apologizing, being attached to the results of it, because it's really not for you. It's just making sure that whatever that other person needs and what that person deserves.
Well, and really that you've done everything in your power to make things right. If the other person doesn't forgive you, in some ways it's irrelevant, because you've done something wrong and you have to do everything in your power to make that right, so that you never do it again. And that's how you acknowledge that you actually care about that person. If that person's not in a place where they can reconcile with you, or if you don't deserve for them to reconcile with you, that's fine. You're happy to sit in that space and do whatever you can to make things right because you care. And it's not really dependent on getting a particular result. A lot of times when people apologize to me, most of you who know me well enough to have wronged me, will know this. But if you wrong me and you come to apologize to me, a lot of times I'll kick a little sand on you. I'll just kick a little sand on you. And then usually people show that they weren't really sorry, that they were looking for something cheap. Because when you make them jump through a couple of hoops, or you kick a little sand on them, or you don't immediately accept their apology, they segue into defending themselves and like re-attacking you all over again. And essentially telling you, I didn't do anything wrong, and you don't deserve my apology anyway. And they show their true colors. And so, if people apologize, I'll forgive anybody. I'll forgive anybody for anything, because I got to move forward in my life. I've got something to do while I'm here. I got to love Krishna, and that means I have to accept responsibility for everything that happened to me, and I got to forgive everybody and forgive myself, and I got to keep moving forward. So, if I think you're a lightweight, I'll just accept your apology, and it's all good, and I'll just move forward in my own life, and you move forward in yours, and the trajectory of our lives need not meet up anymore. I'm most generous with people when I don't take them seriously, because I do the math and I realize they're not serious, and so I just forgive them, and they got what they wanted from me, and I can give them that gift of forgiveness, and they can move forward, and I can move forward, and no problem. If I actually want to reconcile, then I give you a little heat, because I want to see if I can really count on you. And then one of two things happen. People either crack and they show that they weren't really apologetic, they weren't really trying to reconcile, or you watch them and they go deep, and they show that they're sincere, and they're going to go to the deepest place, to the most honest place, to the most vulnerable place, and they're going to be guileless and vulnerable, fully and completely. It's not like, well, how deep do you want me to go? You just go completely deep. Then nobody has to ever ask you to go deeper, because you went as deep as you can possibly go. And you become an open book. And then when you see that, you're like, okay, I can forgive you, because I can see you're not the person who did that to me anymore. You'd never do that again. So yeah, I don't know what you said, Shri, that got me going on that rant. What was it again?
Not being attached to the results.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. There's a selflessness to it. Excellent. Good point. We got time for one more.
I was going to comment. Thank you for this class. All of this is incredibly useful and something that I definitely try to practice, and like taking notes, and actually like when it comes to making an apology, I like reference the notes from these classes and try to do it properly. But I wanted to get your thoughts on, like, when you learn this and you start trying to practice it, then it's hard not to have that expectation of others. And so sometimes...
Yeah, I understand your question. Sure. Well, if you start being a deep person and everybody around you is shallow, then... Oh, how come I can't say... There you go. If you're a deep person and everybody around you is shallow, and used to be shallow, and you become deep, and everybody around you is still shallow. You know, what are you going to do? It's like you're an alcoholic, hanging out with a bunch of alcoholics, then you got sober, and you start being like, oh, these people are all knuckleheads. Yeah, well, what do you expect? So there's a couple things that happen. Number one is you open the door for them. You show an example. Sometimes they deepen up alongside you. Otherwise, you find some new people, and you develop a higher standard. There was a time in your life where like you were in love with some 13-year-old boy because he had a cool haircut. And that was like as deep as you were. when you're 32 years old and you're choosing who you're going to marry, I hope you're not that shallow anymore. You follow? So we got to grow up. And growing up means sometimes that, somebody who was a suitable friend for you in the past is no longer deep enough to be a suitable friend. What can you do? Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, taking notes isn't going to help you. You suck and you struggle with this stuff. You're not that good at it, Miss Note Taker. And so it's not about taking notes. It's about understanding the essence of what I just explained. And even if you're illiterate and you don't say it all perfectly and you don't get all the paragraphs in order, if you're actually going to that deepest, most honest, most vulnerable place, anybody will be able to get it. Like my Spanish, isn't that good. But I could make an excellent apology in Spanish. Because even with my limited vocabulary, I understand what a proper apology looks like. You could take my notes away, or you could have me be forced to switch the paragraphs around or switch the order, and I'd still get it done. Because I understand the essence of what I'm doing. Selflessness, vulnerability, love, empathy, the depth to acknowledge what you've done wrong, not running anymore, making amends, not being afraid of hard work, valuing the other person. These core elements do not depend on mastering the art and science of it. It depends on understanding the core of it and having a big enough heart to go to those places. And even if you're like, I was broken as a child and I have low self-esteem and so I can't go to these really vulnerable places, then you can't make a proper apology. Then go get some therapy, and maybe when you grow up someday, you will be able to. Or maybe if you love somebody enough, you'll go to that place and go through that catharsis because you value that relationship. And that mistake will actually be the birthplace of your personal growth. But there's no way to cheat it. There's no map. There's no script. That's the whole point. Does that make sense, Nani?
Yeah, super. For me, when I try to check off boxes and forget about I do that quite often. Thank you.
Don't check boxes. When you want to make amends with somebody, it's not about checking boxes. It's about going to the deepest, most authentic place. If you're not ready to do that, you actually can't make proper amends. Because you are the kind of person who would do it again. You follow? All right, so like I said, I think this has value in that it teaches us how to apologize. It teaches us what to look for in ourselves. It teaches us where we're going to have to go. And then it also helps us to recognize those qualities in others, even if it's imperfectly composed. And it also helps us to recognize when it's not there, even when it's perfectly composed. And it's, looks good on the outside, but it doesn't have the right core. Okie dokes, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you tomorrow. Nighty night.